Hey, this is Luke from Korneff Audio. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to talk about poke and hang yet again. Now, I'm beating this topic to death because I kind of think it's that important. Before we begin, though, let's get the sundries out of the way. Please press the button to subscribe and go to our website and get on our mailing list. We have some new plugins coming soon. You want to be getting those discounts. All right, so why is poke and hang so important? Well, because if you understand poke and hang, you'll have a lot of control over the short-term dynamics of a sound. And when I mean the short-term dynamics of a sound, I'm really talking about kind of controlling the dynamics of the waveform. I'm not talking about controlling the dynamics of the entire part. You control the dynamics of an entire part with the fader or, with the compressor with the long release. But the individual waveform, controlling the dynamics of the individual waveform is super important. If you understand how to do that, you have a lot of power in the studio. So that's why this whole poke and hang thing is so important. The poke, remember, that's like the attack, right? So that's my symbol for poke. And the hang is the stuff that happens after the attack. So this is the hang, right? So here's the poke and here's the hang. I can draw like a little waveform with my hands. So a drum, percussion, is going to have a lot of poke, and the hang is going to be much quieter than the peak. And strings are not going to have that steep an attack. They're going to have a more shallow attack, and the waveform is going to kind of look like that. Now, an acoustic guitar, it's gonna be something like this. So when we talk about adjusting poke and hang, what we're talking about is balancing these two things out, or changing the balance of these two things. We're almost always knocking down that peak. You can see that's the poke aspect, okay? And this stuff is the hang aspect. So here's poke, that peak, and here's the hang. And the reason I started calling it hang is because the note physically hangs around longer, right? Like if you look at the poke, that's a tiny duration, and if you look at the hang, that's a much longer duration. So I'm going to play an acoustic guitar part for you, and this is with absolutely no processing on it. This is just an acoustic guitar. Now it's got a lot of attack because I'm playing it finger style, but you can still hear the individual details, vibrato, finger squeaks, a little bit of the resonance of the guitar. And you can hear all that stuff because there's only one thing for you to listen to right now, which is the acoustic guitar. Now, if you tuck that acoustic guitar into a mix, where you start heaping things on top of that acoustic guitar, you start getting masking happening. And most of what happens when you're mixing is you're trying to make instruments show through each other. You're really aiming to control masking. So I finally thought of a good way to kind of let you hear this. I have pink noise. So the pink noise here is going to represent everything else in the mix. And we're going to hear how that acoustic guitar is masked or not by the pink noise. So what you're noticing now is certain things, the hang component principally, is dipping underneath the pink noise. It's dipping underneath the overall volume of the mix, and therefore you lose it. So let's turn on a Korneff Audio Pawn Shop comp, which is like the best compressor to demonstrate this, aside from just being like, I don't know, my favorite compressor on the planet. So the first thing I want you to be able to hear is to differentiate and hear the peak, the poke component, from that hang component. And you can hear it's gone. Now if I speed up my release, You notice you can hear things sustaining longer? And it almost sounds like it's going backwards because we're getting rid of the attack. So what's happening is the compressor is nipping off this and releasing to let that get through. Now we're going to do the opposite. I'm going to slow the release down, and what I'm trying to do is hold the hang down and let more of the poke through. So we're going to slow the attack down to let the poke through. And that's definitely a big difference to the signal. If I play with the release, I can probably get rid of most of the hang that you're going to be hearing. Now, if I set the compressor kind of just right, I can get both things happening. I can bring out the attack, and I can also set the release faster such that I get more of that hang component happening. So I'm going to do that now. And that's a pretty good blend of getting the attack happening and getting the hang happening so that the guitar is a little more detailed and sitting higher in the mix. Now, saturation. Let's demonstrate saturation and let you really be able to hear that. I'm going to just turn up the preamp here until I start barely getting some distortion on the track, and then I'm going to back the preamp off a little bit because what I don't want to do is have distortion. So that sounds like a fuzz box, right? All right, that's sort of just kicking in. What's happening here is the distortion is sort of clipping all those peaks right across, right? As we get this louder, these things get forced into clipping. So I'm going to pop in the pink noise so you can hear what this sounds like. Now that doesn't really sound like compression, right? But yet there's definitely something compressed about the whole signal. I want you to listen carefully in here. I'm going to pop this in and out, and you're going to hear how the saturator is knocking off that big peak and letting this kind of get through. And now I'm going to pop in the pawn shop, and this will be cropped down, and you're going to hear this last longer. And listen one more time. You're going to hear these are evened out quite a bit. So remember what saturation is doing. It's nipping off the peak and letting all of this hang get through. So the poke is going away, and the hang is hanging around longer. What I'm hoping you get is an ability to sort of visualize the waveform in your head and how you're affecting this relationship of the pokey thing and the hangy thing. And then when you're listening to it and you're going, well, there's not quite enough detail on this. The note should just be here a little bit longer. You understand, well, I can hit that with a fast compressor, or I can hit that with saturation. I can do a combination of those two things to try to change that short-term dynamic balance. So that's what this is all about. And we'll probably come back to this concept a couple of times because it's really that important. This is like a kind of a fundamental thing. It's like understanding how an EQ works. If you understand short-term dynamics and how to manipulate short-term dynamics, you're going to be mixing a lot better, and you're going to be tracking a lot better. So anyway, that's it for today, and thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you all later, and go make some good music. Go make some great records. Ha-cha-cha-cha-cha.